Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us today. My name is Sarah. I'm the Education and Communication Director at Sierra Nevada Alliance. Um, Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Wolves in California. We have Pam Flick with Defenders of Wildlife. And without further ado, Pam, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you all this afternoon some information about the return of gray wolves to California, which is a really exciting topic. And whether you're for wolves or against wolves, it's definitely a topic that raises a lot of strong emotions. So what Sarah and I had talked about is if you have a clarification question, feel free to either type it in the chat box or raise your hand or whatever the mechanism is here. But we do have folks muted for now, and I would prefer that we hold questions till the end just because I do have a lot of information to share. I want to make sure I get through it all. And with that, we will just get started. So again, I'm Pamela Flick, Senior California Representative for Defenders of Wildlife. I'm based in Sacramento. And for those of you who are not familiar with Defenders of Wildlife, we're a national nonprofit organization that is dedicated to the protection of native wildlife and their natural communities. We were founded more than 70 years ago as defenders of fur bearers to try to end the slaughter of our nation's fur-bearing species. But since then, we've expanded our mission to work on critters with scales and feathers as well as fur. Our headquarters are in Washington, D.C., and as I mentioned, I'm based in Sacramento, which serves as the headquarters for our California program. And Defenders is also a proud founding member of the Pacific Wolf Coalition, which is a network of more than 30 organizations working to further wolf recovery in Washington, Oregon, and California. So if you'd like more information about that, just simply Google Pacific Wolf Coalition. So to provide you with, I hope this will go, okay. A kind of an overview or a roadmap of what I will include in my presentation this afternoon. I'll talk about gray wolf natural history and distribution in North America, reintroduction as a tool for recovery, current wolf populations in the lower 48 United States and here in California, and wolves in the Endangered Species Act, as well as wolves currently here in the Golden State. I'll also talk about implications for recovery in the Western states and moving beyond myths and misconceptions, and the importance of coexisting with wolves and strategies to do so, the ecological role of wolves, and the vision of wolf recovery that we hold here at Defenders of Wildlife. So to start with natural history, most of you are probably aware that gray wolves are the largest member of the canine or dog family, aka canids. They range widely in color from a grizzled gray, which gives them their common name gray wolves, to black or white, and pretty much anywhere in between. And interestingly, some individual wolves in coastal British Columbia even have slightly pinkish coats due to the large percentage of salmon in their diets, or at least that's what researchers believe. I think that's really interesting. I would love to see a pinkish wolf. I don't know about you guys. So they range, the males are slightly larger than the females typically, with a height of 26 to 38 inches at the shoulder, with the females being between 20 and 30 inches. And they weigh between 60 and 120 pounds and are most commonly confused with their smaller cousins, coyotes, which are usually about 20 to 30 pounds. So you see they're can be more than double the size of coyotes. The tall tales of beast-like wolves weighing 250 pounds are completely unfounded in reality. The largest documented wolf in the lower 48 was 141 pounds, and the wildlife biologist estimated that he had between 15 and 20 pounds of meat in his belly when he was captured. Other large wolves in North America include a 175-pound individual in the interior of Alaska back in 1939, and a 172-pounder in Jasper National Park in Canada. I've included here the depiction of a wolf, coyote, and red fox, just to give you an idea of the difference in sizes of these wild canids, as well as comparative tracks of wolf, domestic dog, and coyote there on the right-hand side. So natural history, gray wolves' native prey is primarily ungulates, so large hoofed mammals like elk and deer. They are known to eat beaver and rabbits and other small prey. And they're also opportunistic scavengers, so they will eat animals that have died from other causes like starvation, injury, or disease. Gray wolves live, travel, and hunt in packs or family units of typically between 4 and 7 animals on average. But larger packs, while rare, have been known. And the largest documented pack in the lower 48 was the Druid Pack of Yellowstone National Park, which was 37 members strong. And that was back in 2000. So that's a really, really large pack with lots of mouths to feed. And of course, larger packs can take down larger prey, such as preferentially going after a moose instead of a deer. And when you have that many mouths to feed, it certainly is advantageous to be able to take down larger prey. So packs include the breeding or alpha pair and their pups and several other subordinate or young animals. They typically breed in mid-February. We always say, you know, they're looking for love right around Valentine's Day when sometimes we humans are doing the same thing. And they typically have their pups right in mid-April. Their gestation period's about 62 to 63 days. And then they move their pups from the natal den to areas called rendezvous sites as the pups get larger and a little bit more independent, and they can travel longer distances. Typically, both the den and rendezvous sites are near water sources. So, of course, you know, these animals need a clean, clear, and dependable water source. Let's see. I am very hesitant to bump out of here, but Sarah, if you'll make a note, I will try at the end of the presentation to show you a video of the Shasta pack pups, because it's really adorable. Who doesn't want to see those videos? Okay, thanks. So distribution of gray wolves in North America, they once were common throughout most of our continent, but they were driven to localized extinction, also known as extirpation, in most of the areas of the United States by the mid-1930s through predator control efforts, including bounties. And a bounty is simply a payment of a cash fee for each dead wolf or wolf pelt or skin. And the first documented wolf bounty in North America was passed by the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1630, and the spread of bounties across the continent paralleled the westward expansion of civilization. And the last known wolf bounty I was really shocked to find was in Ontario, Canada, as recently as 1972. We actually are pretty dismayed at the fact that there are some anti-wolf forces in the Northern Rockies that are trying to resurrect bounties and paying for dead wolves or wolf pelts. So we're not necessarily past the time of bounties on wolves' heads. So it's really difficult to know exactly how many wolves there were back in, back before we started taking records of this, but we don't know how many have been killed in North America, but one estimate in Montana alone, between just the years of 1883 and 1918 was more than 80,000 wolves. So that's 80,000 wolves. Looking at distribution across the North American continent here on the map on the left, you'll see that the occupied wolf range in the darker green, mostly restricted to the more northern latitudes. The lighter green on the map, hopefully comes across fine through the webinar, is the historical wolf range. And then in the red crosshatch is suitable wolf range, where wolves once were found, and the components of the habitat and prey structures on those landscapes would still support wolf populations. And I will also note that there are gray wolves depicted on this map, as well as red wolves, which are found in a very, very isolated portion of coastal North Carolina at this time, in the very small red patch on the East Coast. And then there's some red polka dots along the western United States where red wolf historical wolf range can be found. So as we see, the wolf range, the range of gray wolves has been greatly reduced to Canada and Alaska and parts of the Northern Rockies. I will say that this map is slightly outdated in that there are some wolves now in the southern Cascades of south central Oregon and Northern California, which I'll talk about a little bit more later in this presentation. And then breaking news, I don't know if anyone has heard, there was a confirmed individual dispersing wolf in Colorado, right along the Wyoming border. That was just, gosh, I don't know if the news broke yesterday or today, but it's been, you know, that news has taken up a lot of space on my screen today. So that's a big deal that wolves are continuing to disperse south into the Central Rockies. So using reintroduction as a tool for recovery, as many of you may know, gray wolves were reintroduced to the Yellowstone National Park area, as well as into some federal designated wilderness in the central Idaho area in the mid-1990s. And that actually augmented a very small native population in northwestern Montana that persisted even when wolf populations were extirpated elsewhere in the southern or in the lower 48. Mexican gray wolves, which are a subset of gray wolves, were reintroduced into a really relatively small area of western New Mexico and eastern Arizona. And where they you know still exist today. They're tracked very closely, and it's a very small population. So when I talk about recovery, I'm talking about the process by which the decline of an endangered or threatened species is arrested or reversed, or the threats to its survival have been neutralized so that its long-term survival in nature can be ensured. So that reintroduction in the Northern Rockies that I mentioned, that included 66 individual wolves that were taken from Canada and dropped into the Yellowstone ecosystem as well as central Idaho. As far as current wolf population numbers go, there's an estimated 60,000 wolves in Canada and more than 1,600 in the Northern Rocky Mountain states of Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and the eastern portions of Washington and Oregon. And those states and just a sliver of central northern Utah are considered the distinct population segment of the Northern Rocky Mountains for gray wolves, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little while. So remember, distinct population segment, or DPS. In the Great Lakes, there are another maybe 3,000, 3,700 in Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. And there's an estimated 113 Mexican gray wolves in New Mexico and Arizona in the wild, and there is an active captive breeding program, and so there are some individuals that are awaiting release in those facilities. The minimum count in Washington, Oregon, and California here on the Pacific West is about 260. And I say about, it's really hard because you can't count every single wolf. And the fact that Washington and Oregon, the eastern portions of those states, are included in the Northern Rocky DPS, and then which is where most of those wolves live in those states, but they are starting to disperse to western and central Washington and central southern Oregon. And so there's a possibility of some double counting there, but you know, we don't have a really robust population here on the West Coast just yet. But they're coming. So with regards to the Endangered Species Act, the legal status of wolves has changed several times over the past few years. They were one of the original species listed as endangered under the Endangered Species Act. In fact, they were actually listed prior to the Endangered Species Act. There were some predecessor legislation that included gray wolves and protected them prior to the ESA becoming law. But they've always been very controversial, and their status has changed several times because of delisting proposals, various lawsuits, reclassification to threatened species under the ESA or the Federal Endangered Species Act, which is a lesser protection than the endangered species status. And as I mentioned, there are just many, many lawsuits. I won't go into details, but their legal status has flipped and flopped many times. And there have been delisting proposals that have failed and then succeeded. And then I think one of the most concerning things was a precedent-setting move in that Congress legislatively delisted the Northern Rocky Mountain DPS wolf population. And that was the first time that a species had been removed from the endangered species list through a political maneuver as opposed to being based on science and research. So that was very, very concerning, and as I mentioned, a precedent-setting move. So switching gears to wolves here in California, I'm sure everyone on this webinar has heard about the now famous wolf OR7, and his name, OR7, is based on the fact that he was the 7th wild wolf in Oregon to be collared. He has a radio collar and a GPS collar around his neck, and he was born into the Amnaha Pack in northeastern Oregon in 2009. And his journey from northeastern Oregon into California in late December of 2011 really changed things, at least for me personally and professionally here in California, but it really gained a lot of attention because he was the first known wild wolf to be in California in almost 90 years. The last wild wolf that was known to be in California was shot in Lassen County in 1924. So OR7 struck out from northeastern Oregon. He wandered more than 2,000 miles in search of a mate. And when he got into California, like I said, he was the first known wolf in 90 years, and that brought a lot of attention to him. He continued to wander in the North State for almost a year and a half, and I think he traveled and traversed 8 counties in the North State, if I remember correctly. And many thought he was just looking for love in all the wrong places and would be a genetic dead end. But he eventually turned back to Southern Oregon and found a mate and became the patriarch of the Rogue Pack. And that was announced in June of 2014, which was a really big day. It was early June 2014, and the California Fish and Game Commission was holding a hearing in Humboldt County to determine whether they would list wolves under the California Endangered Species Act, or CESA. And it was that same very day that the hearing had already started. It was in Fortuna, and I was looking through my email as I'm waiting for my turn to testify in support of listing, and a news flash came across my screen, and it said that ODFW, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, announced that OR7 had pups, and they dubbed it the Rogue Pack. And I just couldn't believe I was sitting in a standing room only Fish and Game Commission hearing, and this news had not broken yet. And so I definitely a memorable scene of my professional career was standing at the dais and introducing myself to the commission and the department staff and saying, good morning, commissioners. This is Pamela Flick with Defenders of Wildlife. I bring you this breaking news out of Oregon, and OR7 has pups, and they have created the Rogue Pack just a stone's throw from our northern border. And the room erupted, and there were some interesting sideways glances between the commissioners and the department because they thought that they were in pretty close contact with ODFW about wolves, but they didn't get that memo before ODFW broke that news to the press. So the commission did go ahead and decided that listing was warranted for gray wolves, and so now wolves are protected under our state Endangered Species Act as endangered, and that will play into some key components of wolf recovery here in just a few minutes. I'll share with you on that. So let's see, I guess the following summer, the Shasta Pack was announced in Siskiyou County. There are photos of them here on the right-hand side, and you'll notice that they're all dark wolves. They're all pretty much black wolves, which was very unique for this pack. And they became our first known pack in almost a century. But since then, there have been no verified detections of Shasta Pack members, well, since November 2016, when there was one of the male juveniles was videotaped in northwestern Nevada. I call him Burning Man Curious because he's about 20 miles from Black Rock City, where they have Burning Man. And someone videotaped him, and the Nevada Department of Wildlife folks went out, found some scat, found some wolf poop, and did genetic testing on him, and they were able to confirm that he was one of the Shasta Pack juvenile males. But since then, the Shasta Pack has not since been heard of. So there's a lot of speculation that they were poached, which means illegally killed, either shot or poisoned, or a combination of those. Then I will also note that in December, well, going back, to its credit, the Department of Fish and Wildlife here in California, after OR7 came to town, so to speak, they convened a very interesting, varied group of stakeholders to provide input and guidance on developing California's first wolf conservation and management plan. And so in doing so, they created what they called the California Wolf Stakeholder Working Group, or SWIG. And the SWIG over several years met more than 40 times. And between the full SWIG and the subcommittees working on a variety of the chapters, including wolf ungulate interactions, livestock wolf interactions, wolf conservation, funding opportunities, etc. And in December of 2016, CDFW finally released its final version of the California Wolf Conservation Management Plan, which is available online. If you're interested, you can just simply Google CDFW and gray wolves, and that will take you to the department's very informative wolf page. And it has the plan and all of the updates from wolf sightings and livestock loss investigation reports for potential depredations that have occurred from wolves. So as I mentioned, the legal status currently is endangered for gray wolves, both under the Federal Endangered Species Act and the California Endangered Species Act, but that may change soon. More to come on that. In 2015, a lone female wolf was detected on a trail camera in Lassen County, and then in the following late winter, 2 tracks of wolves were found traveling together, and then in 2017, the Lassen Pack was announced in Lassen County, and they were found on the Lassen National Forest, and they had pups that year, and again in 2018. And so this year it looks like the female who has the radio collar on her, that's her on the bottom right before she was collared, that she has localized yet again this spring into summer, which indicates that she likely is in a den once again. So as far as I know, CDFW has not yet announced that the Lassen Pack has pups again, but that is the assumption moving forward. So with the minimum count of the Shasta Pack, the Lassen Pack's last 2 years, and then individual wolves, it appears that at least 26 individual wolves have been known to be in California, either traveling through or having been born here and residing here. So you know, they're really not, no longer just moving through, but they have settled into some of their historical habitat here in the Golden State. So implications for recovery in the Pacific West. This graphic on the right-hand side is from a Defenders of Wildlife publication about places for wolves. And it shows within the solid red boundary occupied wolf range, although again, it's a bit outdated because we haven't updated the rogue pack and Northern California. I need to talk to my people because they haven't done that yet. But where wolves have been delisted, so where their protections under the Endangered Species Act have been taken away, and the management of gray wolves has reverted to state management. Aggressive hunting seasons and lethal control of wolves has occurred, and this may reduce populations so much that wolves cannot adequately disperse into unoccupied areas of their native range, such as here in California and much of the Pacific West. So, you know, just in the Northern Rockies alone, since delisting by Congress in 2011 that I've previously mentioned, more than 3,500 individual wolves have been killed in like 8 years. And so that has serious implications for, you know, pushing out more wolves into more places that are currently unoccupied yet suitable to host wolf populations. So, you know, wolves are very reproductively successful, but these aggressive wolf management regimes really do have implications for successful recovery throughout a significant portion of the species range. So this is a graphic of one of Defender's more popular bumper stickers, you know, and we did this because we feel like it's really important to move beyond the myths and misconceptions around gray wolves. You know, we probably all remember reading Little Red Riding Hood or Three Little Pigs, and the wolf is always demonized and is always the villain. But we really feel differently, that the wolf is not as evil as of a creature as legends, myths, and misinformation would lead you to believe. They're certainly an apex predator that is a carnivore, and they make their living by killing other animals in order to survive. But wolves are also very timid creatures, and most will run from humans before we even know they're anywhere near us. And with an estimated 65,000 gray wolves living in the US and Canada, and more than 350 million humans sharing that same landscape, you'd think that wolf-human conflicts would be relatively common, and they're just simply not. There's really only 2 known cases of gray wolves killing humans, and honestly, one of them is not 100% verified. One was certainly verified up in Alaska. There's a young woman jogging near a landfill, and she had earbuds in her ears, and she was jogging, triggering the classic predator response to go after prey. And then there was a gentleman up in, I believe this is Saskatchewan, Canada, and that's the one that had not, it wasn't necessarily verified that wolves had killed him. But, you know, most of the wolf's bad rap comes from the fact that they're sometimes found to take down livestock. So let's talk about threats to livestock for a minute. This is a graphic that the Sierra Club pulled together based on 2010 National Agricultural Statistics Survey data, and I'm very hopeful that they will update this when 2020 ag statistics become available. But when you look at the overall, you know, the overall causes of death to livestock, this specifically is cattle, you see respiratory problems and digestive problems and calving problems and disease and injury and metabolic problems and other unidentified health problems, and even weather are a significant portion of the causes of death for cattle. And then when you start looking at kind of the back end of the cow, so to speak, you start getting into these, you know, carnivore domestic dogs, poisoning, and other causes of death. And so I just put this in here to show that, you know, wolves and other carnivores are just a sliver of the overall causes of death. But with that said, I will also note that predation from wolves can have a disproportionate impact on specific individual livestock producers, and that fact should not be glazed over, because we understand, ranchers these days, and probably always historically, have operated on a super razor thin margin, economic margin. And so if one or a handful of their cattle or their sheep are taken by above and beyond what their normal losses are per year, it can really hit home and be a significant economic impact. So acknowledging that wolves do kill livestock from time to time, my organization works with ranchers to help deter wolves from interacting with livestock as much as possible. We believe a key to wolf survival, besides adequate habitat and food resources, is simply human tolerance. And so that's why we work to further coexistence between people and wolves, as well as other predators throughout the country. So we manage multiple coexistence operations. And when I say coexistence, it simply means where predators and humans or human interests, such as livestock grazing, can successfully and peacefully share the landscape. So many non-lethal tools have been proven effective for preventing wolf depredations of livestock, so livestock losses caused by wolf kills. And some of these, I'll talk really quickly here about these different tools and methods, and a little bit more in following slides. But attractant removals, like taking sick animals, dead animals, their carcasses off the landscape, or covering them or protecting bone piles, or pits where some farmers will stockpile their dead. That's really important because, as I mentioned, wolves are opportunistic scavengers, and so they take advantage of an easy meal whenever they can. Flattery or turbo flattery pens or fences have been very effective, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Increasing the presence of humans is very important, and there are range riding successes that have happened all over the West, especially in the Northern Rockies, just to increase the human presence, and then also, of course, the use of livestock guardian dogs or livestock protection dogs, and scare tactics and tools like alarms and fox lights and non-lethal ammunition. So reducing attractants, as I mentioned, wolves will take an easy meal whenever they can, and they have a keen sense of smell, just like many other canids, and they can detect prey more than 2 miles away. So any dead, diseased, or dying animal is an attractant for not only wolves, but all scavengers. And they are easily identified as vulnerable prey to wolves and other predators. So it's really important that ranchers, whenever possible, haul away or bury their livestock carcasses, which we understand is not always feasible. In California, we have a mix of regulations that do or do not allow burying of livestock, mostly because of water quality and disease concerns. So there's a small group of folks in Northern California that are actually currently researching. They have a research permit to look into composting and burying attractants and carcasses. And we're hopeful that some of the results of that might actually bring about policy change to give the ranchers more tools on this front. As I mentioned, you can also fence in carcass pits or burying the bone piles, and then calving strategies such as like having calving camps or bringing in sheep at night, bedding them down and having pens at night, or scheduling calving for when other prey is abundant, like in the spring. We here in California have a wide variety of calving and lambing strategies because we don't have the deep, harsh winters that they have in the Northern Rockies that really dictate how ranchers will calve or lamb. And we have some interesting calving and lambing strategies that occur sometimes really early, either in the winter, early fall, or very early spring. So they don't always match when other prey like deer and elk are abundant. So this is Flattery. If you haven't seen Flattery before and you heard me talking about this, it's simply a single string with these flags on it, brightly colored flags. And the turbo Flattery, as I mentioned, is a Flattery that is strung up on electric poly wire. So it's an electric fence with flags. And this has been particularly successful around wolves and livestock at night. And it has been deployed here in California for the last about 2 years with great success. I was able to get a natural resource conservation service conservation innovation grant that allowed us to provide Flattery to producers to try before they buy, and it's been successful. Unfortunately, wolves will become habituated to it. They're really smart, and so the effectiveness is generally up to about 60 days or so, and so it's really critical to be using these kinds of tools during the most vulnerable times, like when you're calving or lambing or at night. So increased human presence, as I mentioned, is really important, not only to keep an eye on where wolves are, but also just to keep an eye on your livestock. The ability for somebody to be out on the range to see if there's an animal that is injured that could use some field doctoring, or the one that's sick that might need to come out of the field for a while and be nursed back to health. All of those are really important to avoid having vulnerable livestock out on the range. Livestock guardian dogs have been used. They typically are more commonly used with smaller stock like sheep and goats, but they have been used and are successful in those applications. And then scare tactics, as I mentioned, alarms, shock collars, non-lethal ammunition. These are other tools that have been found to be successfully used as well. So as I mentioned, the importance of coexistence it's a critical piece to successful recovery of wolves. If they're delisted, there is a current proposal to delist wolves in the lower 48. We feel that these non-lethal coexistence tools will be more important than ever. And as I mentioned, states that allow lethal control when livestock are killed, we really need to encourage the use of coexistence tools to prevent unnecessary killing of wolves. And we are really interested in avoiding the conflicts to begin with. Defenders did pioneer a compensation program after the introduction of wolves to the Northern Rockies, because we recognize the economic burden that was placed squarely on the shoulders of ranchers in the Northern Rockies after the reintroduction effort. And so we created a compensation program that would pay fair market value for lost animals that were confirmed to have been taken by wolves. And then once a federal funding and a federal program that was modeled off of our compensation program came into being several years back, we moved away from compensation into more proactive work to try and avoid these conflicts from happening in the first place. And so, we feel that in the long run, it's best to protect livestock than to kill wolves, because other pack members are likely to continue to kill livestock if poor husbandry techniques are used, because I think we all know that nature abhors a vacuum. And if you don't take care of the problem in the first place, the problem will reoccur. So some of you may have heard about this trophic cascade scenario that came out of the Northern Rockies in the Yellowstone ecosystem before wolves were reintroduced, that is to say. Things were simplified. There was over-browsing and overgrazing by the ungulates community, and that impacted streamside or riparian vegetation, the willows, the fish and songbird habitat. And then, once wolves were reintroduced, it increased the vigilance of these ungulates. So the elk and the deer kept their heads up more. They moved around the landscape more instead of settling into streamside areas where they overbrowsed and grazed. And it had a ripple effect of positive ecological impacts afterwards. So wolves have, really regulated prey distribution on the landscape and overall impacted native biodiversity in a positive way. And they also tend to prey on the more vulnerable individuals, because why wouldn't you go after the easiest meal? And that includes diseased, weak, old, injured, and also very young prey, which in turn keeps those prey populations healthy and more vigorous. So Defender's vision of future wolf recovery includes the suitable habitat that is usually found on public lands away from major human population centers, and there's plenty of unoccupied suitable habitat remaining. But if, as I mentioned before, if wolves are delisted, they may just have a harder time getting to those areas because they won't be pushed to disperse from where they currently are located. And so simply put, I think many of my wildlife conservation colleagues and myself would like to see more wolves in more places than they are currently in the lower 48, and that's what we're working towards. So as I mentioned, there is a federal wolf delisting proposal that there's an open comment period. It ends next week. Let's see, that is next Monday. So if you haven't had a chance to weigh in on that yet, I highly encourage you to. If you don't have my contact information, get in touch with Sarah, the Alliance, and I'd be happy to give you more information about it. But the Trump administration has proposed to remove all remaining federal protections for gray wolves from the Endangered Species Act, so essentially delisting them across the entire 48 states, except for Mexican wolves, which is a subspecies that's distinct, and they will remain listed. And so essentially everything that hasn't been delisted, that is to say the Northern Rocky Mountains population, the distinct population segment, everything including wolves here in California will no longer have federal protections. And as I hinted at earlier in the presentation, that's why it's so critically important that California took the step above and beyond and protected gray wolves under our California Endangered Species Act, so that even if federal protections go away, the species will remain protected in California, at least for the time being. So with that, I will say that I really appreciate all of you for joining us, and I would be happy to take any questions. And here's my contact information. If you'd like to contact me directly, I always welcome an opportunity to talk about wolves. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Do you want to show us the Shasta pups?
Oh, yes. Thank you for the reminder. Okay, let me see if I can navigate all this. You guys are going to see my very busy background. Let's see. Sorry, let's do this. Okay, now it's a matter of finding them because I didn't have it uploaded. So this is the Shasta Pack pups at a rendezvous site in August of 2015. So they call it a video, but it's really just a string of a bunch of still photos. But I think it's really fun to watch them kind of rolling around and playing a little bit, sniffing out their new territory. And I think it's so neat to see that they're all black in coloration. It's pretty neat, I think. Is that coming across, Sarah?
Yeah.
Great. Great. So with that, I'll just leave this running for now. And does anyone have any questions?
There's a question written in Pam.
Okay.
Hi, Pam. The DOW recovery maps seem to exclude Nevada, but there was a suitable habitat mapped along several borders. Is that due to lack of data or state participation? Thanks for continued important work with wolves.
Thank you. That's a really great question. So I think, let me try and get out of here. I think what that person, who I'm guessing that was Dale.
That was Dale, yeah.
Dale's Keen. I'm thinking, yeah, I think that's a really good question, Dale. I think it's probably a little bit of both. I think not having much historical data on where wolves were in Nevada in the past might have something to do with it. But it's really interesting when you look at that line. It does just kind of exclude Nevada entirely, and I'm quite sure, especially with all of their mountains and ranges in Nevada, that there has to be some suitable habitat in there. So I'm guessing that it's a combination of the two factors, that it's lacking data and participation. I'm not sure Nevada's really excited to have wolves back. I know that there were some eye rolls when that juvenile from the Shasta pack came over that way.
Dale said that I know Nevada biologists were in wolf denial in the past.
Yep, I think that's right. Thanks, Dale. Nice. Glad you could join us. Any other questions? If not, I will just say once again, thank you all for joining. And I understand Sarah's recorded this, so it will be up somewhere on the Sierra Nevada Alliance website, I assume. And again, if you would like to get in touch with me, I would be happy to chat with you further.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'll be sending out this recording to everybody who signed up, and it will also eventually be available on the Alliance website. So thanks so much, Pam, for taking the time to share with us today.
Sure, you're welcome. Thank you, everyone. I'm looking at all of your names here. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and have a great afternoon.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye.